I don't know. Maybe people need a little extra time to get ready or something, but counts down to 5 or from 5. So
The report was people maybe were reporting in, hey, listen, the 3-2-1 comes too fast. We need a little
feels
more
like it's
time.
only just a few seconds. Go
It's like,
figure.
I know, it's like, well, yeah, but you're hitting the button. So
Right.
you're hitting the
Like, how do
button.
you not know it's coming?
Yeah, it doesn't all of a sudden start and you're like, oh, wait, it's starting. They should give me 10 seconds or something. Like, no, if you need 10 seconds, then just wait 7 seconds and then hit the button and it'll count down 3. It's easy math.
Oh man. That felt like some Common Core stuff going on there for a second.
I know. That is true.
It is the truth. It is the truth. All right, let me get this shared out here real quick to the groups. Get that going.
I'm glad Iowa won for the sake of the Big Ten. It blew I had Florida into the I had Florida into the Final Four.
Same. I did too. You know, and the hard thing for me right now is my wife picked Florida getting beat by Vanderbilt, I think.
Yeah.
So like her bracket was going to be toast, but now
all of a sudden,
she's got a chance to, yeah. So she's beating me, and she lets me know every single day that she's beating me.
But here's the deal. I mean, is there any way that you can choose this, Chris? I literally went this year. Okay, this year I thought, okay, is it just randomness, or is it possible to do enough research and so on to make it to where it's like scientific?
Right.
So do you know what I did?
What'd you do?
I Googled the top 10 most accurate, not commentators, what's the word? Analysts or whatever.
Analysts.
Yeah. And I said, simulate the 2024 bracket. Just a little Google search based on the top 10 analysts. And it literally listed the winners of the 64. And I just used that. Now, see, they didn't choose High Point.
Right.
There's no way you can choose the upsets. There's no way.
No, 100%. It's exactly what I told my wife.
There's no way Santa Clara should have beat like Kentucky. Right? Santa Clara. Yeah, I mean, you're not going to pick that,
right? If you did,
yeah, then you're just making rando.
Right. So last year, I was getting just destroyed early on.
Mm-hmm.
But what I did last year was, which I typically never do, but I went with all the main teams. And I think it was the first time in however many years that that all number ones made it.
Oh yes,
and
right.
So I ended up in our big bracket. There's a bracket I'm in with like 180 people, whatever, and I finished 12th. And so I was telling my wife, I said, "Here's the deal. Like, I picked upsets, and I picked upsets that I thought, man, these are like legit potential upsets that can happen, whatever." Very few of those happened this year.
Yes,
and there were more like High Point rando, just out of nowhere upsets. There's no way, unless you're just absolutely just the luckiest person, that you're ever going to guess that. There's no way.
I chose Miami of Ohio as an upset simply because I thought, you know what?
They got
something to prove. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. They got a little chip on their shoulder. And I mean, how was I to know that they were going to go out there and play like their basketball shorts were around their knees the whole game?
Exactly. Well, and I love like people. I mean, technically, yes. Technically, Texas is, an upset. But somebody said, listen, you can't call the institution with the largest enrollment and the largest financial whatever you can't call that really an upset. Like, what are you talking
Right.
about?
Right. Right. Like Michigan State beating somebody is never going to be an upset in the tournament.
No,
I don't care if Michigan
no,
State comes in as 12 and they're beating a 3. I mean, Michigan
right.
State's just not going to be an upset. Like, so exactly. You know, I did think it was interesting that Wright State actually played a better game than
Bro,
Miami. I mean,
bro.
Wright State could have won if they could have kept what they were
Should
doing in the
have
first
won.
half. They should have won.
That's the
Yeah, they were up.
problem.
They were up with 4 minutes to go,
I know. The
and
problem
then
with those teams is like, they it shows like how narrow the talent is. And I think, NIL
it's
has
a good
made
point.
it where these teams can afford to get a guy.
Mhm.
Problem is depth.
Yes.
These small teams, they may have one or two guys that really have to carry the load. And if you don't have a couple other guys, eventually,
Yeah.
the depth of the big team, the big dogs is gonna
Mhm.
get you. So
Like it's just like Iowa State. Iowa State is you talk about a perfect descriptor of the power of depth. I mean,
yeah,
if they were a mid major, they would have been they wouldn't even have been competing. But because
right,
their All American is out, and
right, right.
they put a stomping on what was who they play last.
I
Oh
turned it
crap!
off so fast I didn't remember.
It all runs together.
It does. It really does.
I know they were with Houston. I can't remember, but anyway, yeah, it was. Man, they put a stomping on them, and they played good, and they played some serious hard defense. I'll tell you, a team.
So they beat Kentucky.
Well,
Yeah, because Santa Clara was close, but Kentucky ended up winning that game.
oh yeah,
And
that's
then
right,
Iowa
that's right, that's right. Iowa
beat
State beat
Kentucky
Kentucky.
because
Yeah,
I
that's
had
right.
I had Santa Clara as another.
Oh,
That was one of my
they
upsets
made
that I
that
picked.
shot against Santa Clara. That's what it was.
Yes.
Kentucky made that
Yeah.
shot. But the funny thing about it is, like, you look at, you look at Iowa State. The matchup nightmare is Illinois. I would not want to, if I was a coach, I would not want to be playing Illinois. I'd be thinking, man, how can we spread this thing out? The only thing that Illinois could get would be, would be bad for Illinois is if they played a team that ran a fast motion offense with some heavy duty 3-point shooting and just spread them out all over the floor and whatever. They're, but they're not unathletic. I just don't know where they're getting these people.
Yeah.
Ashnashevitz and Snagavakadits and all of
Right.
them, whatever.
Right.
Where are they getting
Right.
these people from?
Well,
Where's
like like
Underwood? Where's Underwood recruiting?
like Raph said, take me to the Balkans. Did you hear that call? I want a
No.
t-shirt that says take me to the Balkans. So the dude comes down for VCU and tried to hammer one, and he got blocked by 7'4" Zvonimir Ivisic.
Yeah.
And then on the fast break, they get it back
Yes.
to him, and Ivisic absolutely obliterates the
Yeah.
rim.
Yeah.
And Raph said, "Take me to the Balkans, please." So they've got they got all these Balkans guys.
It is so funny. Well, it's funny because you look at some of these teams, and it's interesting how when you look at NCAA basketball these days, it is the complexion of NCAA basketball has really transformed a lot since I was, you and I were in high
Oh,
school.
absolutely.
It's you see a lot more. There was a lot more racial disparity in the 80s and 90s, and now you see a pretty good balance, and some of that's from these European players and whatever. But it's pretty interesting because it's a fun. This is a fun tournament this year.
It is. It is. And the hard part with it is even like Illinois. I mean, obviously, I'm for it, but David Merkovich, or he said you can call him. His name is David. He
Oh, is
said,
it
but
David?
I go by David or David. It's so funny. You call me David or David, but the dude's been playing pro ball since he was like 15.
Yeah.
So like
That's a good point.
I think he's 21 or something. He's a freshman. So, like it kinda makes it a little odd and a little weird, but
Yeah.
it is what it is.
But
So
so's the portal. So I don't know.
it is. I agree. 100%. 100%. So, well, it looks like we got a little, looks like YouTube is gonna be a little interesting today. So that's always fun when that
Is it?
happens.
Is YouTube? I haven't seen the chat.
Yeah, I blocked the dude already and whatever. He was trying to get us to say, those where you say a name that's off color, it doesn't you don't know it is, but it looks like it is. And so the guy put one in the chat. It was off color,
Oh,
trying to get us to say, "Hey, it's good to have so and
yeah.
so."
Yeah.
It's an off color deal. So
Boy, oh boy.
he got
I'll
the
tell you.
immediate hammer.
You got the hammer.
Yeah, so we'll just be careful with who we engage with on YouTube today. So just be aware of that.
Oh, I see it. Kim
Always fun.
Bistarki, by the way,
Yeah.
I was just with our chief meteorologist this last weekend.
Is that right? That's awesome, man.
He was in service with us in Northeast Ohio. I was preaching homecoming services for Scott Ardary, and he was there on Friday night, and then on Saturday he was with he brought his pastor. So Chief Meteorologist Kim Bistarki checking in today, says sunny and 29 degrees with a high of 46 in Northeast Ohio. A little snow action last night, but the devil is a liar. That is an apostolic meteorologist right there.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. We're in that season, man. I was looking at the weather right before we got on here, and it's like 67, 43, 72, 48. Like it just is up and down all over the place, and
I know.
storms and all the crazy stuff. So, but
Right.
you know what it tells me, Ken?
Tell me what it tells you. Tell me what it tells you.
The Masters right around the corner, and golf is right around the corner.
Bubba, listen to me. By the way, if I drop off, just so you know, it just popped a big yellow box on my screen. It says, it seems your account was changed. Some things may not work well. Refresh the page. I'm not going to refresh.
What?
I'm not going to refresh
What?
the page. I'm just going to continue with the big yellow box over the top.
Ruh-roh.
Yes. It's a hat on your head, actually. And so my ADD on the screen. I'm going to have to expand
That is
it.
hilarious.
Oh no, it moves with you. I was going to move us or shrink us or something to change.
Oh, that is
Anyway,
awesome.
speaking of the Masters, Miss Dillahan, she got, you know what she got?
What you got?
She got a Masters. They have the azalea wear for women.
Okay.
And she has an azalea sweatshirt, like a cream colored azalea with azaleas on it, and with the Masters, the Masters logoing, and then a Masters green matching skirt. What? Yeah,
All
she's
going all in on the Masters.
She's sporting some Masters. She's counting it down, ready to go.
Sounds like you're prepping for a visit to the Masters is what it sounds like.
Mm-hmm. Well, see, I
I
can't wear this. This is my old school. This is my old school Adidas Argyle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
It's an Argyle.
like it.
Quarter zip. It's a quarter zip, bro. But
like
I'm not
it.
drinking matcha.
Tony Richard played Pinehurst too. Ooh, man. You ever played Pinehurst too?
I have. I went played Pinehurst number 2. I had to send my our pro had to send my handicap in because I wanted to play from the US Open tee boxes. I got a caddy. This is my Pinehurst story. I got a caddy. Stephanie was supposed to play. She saw the course and she said, "You mind if I just go to the spa?" She said, take from my greens fees and get you a good caddy. He had actually caddied at the US Open, and he's a local caddy. And hole number 1, got up, I was in the fairway, and he said, "What are you hitting here?" And I said, "I think I'm to hit a pitching wedge." He said, "No, hit a flighted 9-iron." And I said, "No, I'll fly over the green." And he said, "Well, if you hit a pitching wedge," he said, "you're going to roll back in the front." And he said, "It'll roll off." And I said, well, what if I put a little extra on it? And he said, it'll just roll off faster. And I'm like, man, I don't know if I can hit a flight at 9 iron. So I went ahead and hit the pitching wedge. It lands literally 2 feet from the hole. And I'm like, take that, bro. And he goes, well, just watch. And it goes, and it starts rolling. It comes down off the front of the green, rolls around, and it's set up for, it's like a racetrack. And it goes, punk, into the pot bunker to the left. He said, have fun with that one.
That is awesome.
So I blasted it out. I was 25, 30 feet from the hole. So now I'm scared that I'm going to put past it. So then I hit one
Right
10 feet short. And so I double bogeyed. So I went double bogey, bogey, bogey. And he said, if you don't listen to me, this is going to be a very long day for you. I said, all right, I'm going to play everything that you tell me to play from here on out. And I played par golf from the rest of the
Really?
yep. I went double bogey bogey, and I shot a 76 or 70. Is it 71? I think it was a par 71, 75. Anyway, yeah, it was. I was not listening to him, and he's like, "You should have just played by yourself. I'm just carrying your clubs at this point."
That is
He
awesome.
was awesome. He was such a smart aleck. He
That is
was.
awesome.
It was kind of good. It's kind of fun. He was kind of a
Yeah.
smart aleck, and it was like,
Well, and Tony Richards, shot a 92. Like a course like that, bro, you can get blown up quick on a course like that.
bro. Well, and the thing is like he's saying, the turtle shell, like it's really insane because there was one hole. He told me, he said, I want you to putt this. I was 20 yards off, and he was like, putt this one. I'm like, okay, and it goes up, and it's almost like it funneled to the hole. And he's like, yeah, this is the position, this is the pin position for that shot. And so, I mean, I would have known that. And then
Right.
on one hole on the back, he said, it was a par three. And he told me, he said, hit one. He said, why don't you go ahead and hit, it was like 100 and it was really weird. It was like 178 yards. Well, I normally would hit a smooth six. I hit my 6 iron 185 ish. So I'm like, I would hit a smooth six. He said, hit a 3/4 hold off 5 iron. Just a little cut 5 iron. It probably didn't get 30 feet off the ground. Hits 20 yards in front of the green. He goes, skip, 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 and comes up and goes, boom. I mean, it's like way uphill, and it stops just under the hole. He said, now you got a 5-foot birdie putt uphill. I'm like,
awesome.
golly, those are really cool. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, it's coming. Golf season is coming, so I'm looking forward to it.
It is.
I didn't play much last year, so I'm looking forward to a good year this year. So, all right, we got to get going. You got a X group in 33 minutes.
I do. I don't have to be on it till 11:15, so just give me a little time. Just give me some time.
Yeah. All right, here we go. We're gonna go live. You ready?
Ready.
3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mobilized Church Podcast. This is Chris Dillingham, alongside my big brother Ken Dillingham, Jr. the Third, on this brisk, cool Tuesday morning. Ken, it's a beautiful day. Spring is coming. We've been having a little golf talk in the pre-show. It's got me kind of amped up. Golf.
It's on, bro. I'm just trying to think with our schedule today. We got coaching and all the stuff. I'm thinking, man, can I get to the driving range?
I need to. It's a little chilly for the driving range, I think, today here, but definitely coming. Today also, Ken, is a special day. We want to
Yeah.
just mention today is the 2-year anniversary of our mom passing away. Certainly miss mom. And I was thinking about, and we may I didn't have a chance to mention this to you, but man, maybe doing an episode about, I was thinking this morning just about like the power of decisions and how that affects so many things. And, I was thinking about, you got 7 grandkids, all in ministry, three student pastors, everybody serving the Lord, coming from where we've come from. So we certainly owe mom a great debt of gratitude, and how that just totally changed our
Yeah,
whole family tree.
that's so true. Yeah, it's so true. It's it's one of those deals where when you think, you think back and you think about sometimes how thin the margin is for people. You
Yeah.
think of how thin the margin is for people that we know, their story, our story, and sometimes you realize the power of the grace of God, but you also understand how, if these few events hadn't happened, and if, and so on and so forth. So yeah, we give her honor today. And this this podcast is brought to you by Patricia Pierce Uhitchel.
There you go. There you go. So just filled with gratitude this morning, and thankful for, and the reason we're here and doing what we do is because even when we didn't want to go, even
Oh,
when
yeah.
we had no interest in the church stuff, between her and our stepdad Rick, and just made it possible. So certainly blessed, thankful today. Kind of getting in the fields a little bit this morning, but
I know.
so all right, you ready to rock and roll
Let's
today?
boogie. Let's
Let's
boogie.
boogie today. Let's get into it. We got
Let's
a
put our
quick
game face on.
conversation.
We got a podcast to do. Let's put our game face on.
100%. So I'm gonna let you kind
Okay.
of drive this conversation today, but I do really think it is such a timely conversation that needs to be had. We've mentioned before the book about bad therapy,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
kind of some of the impact and effects of therapy, and just the culture of therapy, not necessarily the impact, but the culture of
Mm-hmm.
ongoing, never-ending therapy, that kind of stuff. And in spite of having all this therapy available, you still have the most mentally unhealthy generation around. So today, kind of a
Mm-hmm.
similar type vein, just talking about kind of the uh, living in a culture of abundance and excess.
Mm-hmm.
We have access to so much. There's so much available to us. And years ago, I was reading an article, and it was talking about, I tend to be a very minimalist type person. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and it was talking about how that, like, part of the anxiety and some of the things that people are feeling today is because you just have too many choices. When you go into your closet, the looking at a closet full of clothes adds stress. It sounds
Right.
crazy, but it does add additional stress, and that's in every aspect, in every area of our lives. And so kind of tying in a little bit to that about, all of the access to things that we have, the abundance of stuff, but specifically, media, social media, all of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We're living in a day where people are just weary. They're worn down.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like there's never a time where people can kind of get that mental break and that mental freedom, and just running on fumes. So today we want to talk about, title of our episode is Exhausted by Freedom. So talk to us about what that means. Kind of give us the groundwork for this.
All right. So this is kind of like a diagnosis, and that is, we'll begin today with a book by Barry Schwartz. He has a book called The Paradox of Choice, and in his book called The Paradox of Choice, that's the title, but it's also the concept. The book is titled according to the very thing that he writes about, which is that people have a paralysis, and it's paralysis and regret that comes from so many options being available. In fact, his book and some of the subsequent behavioral research demonstrates that more options do not increase satisfaction.
Yeah.
In fact, the more options that are available actually increases post-decision anxiety. And there's a lot of, we're not going to dig real deep into this, but for those that want to go dive a little deeper, Just search Barry Schwartz, paradox of choice. Also, post decision anxiety. There's a lot of information about that, but basically, what it's talking about is that people sort of experience what they call maximizer stress, which
Okay.
is interesting because what we want to do is maximization, which is funny because this is the opposite of what you talked about minimalism.
Yeah.
So advertising has created a maximization consumer culture, which basically means, am I choosing the best thing?
Mm-hmm.
Am I getting the absolute, am I squeezing out the absolute maximum for what I'm spending?
Yeah.
Am I getting the best product, the biggest processor on the computer? Am I getting, do I need, do I really need 32, you know,
Bro.
RAM? Do I really need, is it, et cetera? Is the M5 chip so much better than the A14? Is it, and so on and so forth. So, it,
Apple's the master at that, dude. The iPhone,
yeah, yeah,
literally every
yeah.
6 months,
Hmm.
they're making changes, and it makes you feel like, well, I don't have that.
Yeah.
I'm missing out on this new feature or this new component that makes it so much better.
So true, which is why I still have a 14. And the thing is and what they'll do is they'll say, well, this chip is 4.3 times faster than the former generation. Oh, well, that means I'm 4.3 times behind. Look how far I'm getting behind here. And
Yeah.
if they can't improve the chip, they're going to improve the camera. So
Yeah.
anyway, it's counterfactual thinking, right? What if it's counterfactual? In other words, okay, so you do the research, you go through, you consider the options, but then all of a sudden it becomes paralysis by analysis because you start thinking, well, but okay, but then if I choose this option, and then which option is more important? Would I rather have this or would I rather have that? And then how does that affect the price? And then how does that affect which model I get? And then how will that affect, even believe it or not, how people will perceive me
Mm-hmm.
if I get this one versus that one? Well, what if I get a car and I can actually maximize the vehicle I get by getting a lower trim level that has cloth seats instead of leather seats. Well, but then what if my friends drive with me and they know that I have cloth seats instead of leather seats and they all have leather seats? And so, right. So it's like, and
Yeah.
like leather's a luxury feature. And so what happens is this is what they call counterfactual thinking. What if the other option was better? Persistent dissatisfaction, even after good decisions, good research, good decisions were made. And so this is how has evolved into a new form of buyer's remorse that's not driven. This is weird. Okay, we have a new form of buyer's remorse that's not driven by bad decisions, but by too many visible alternatives. And so
Hmm.
because of this, the mind never rests before, right? So if it never rests, it never closes the loop. It never says, I'm done with that. And so once you make a decision, once you make a purchase, it should be done.
Yeah.
You made the purchase, you've got the thing, now use the dumb thing. No, I'm still thinking about it. I'm still walking through in my mind. Is that, man, I wonder if I should have got that other thing. um, so anyway, so another piece of this is information saturation. I'm not going to obviously this is about cognitive overload, and so I'm not going to I'm not going to walk into this one too deeply because I don't want to do what I'm actually talking about. But it basically what
Right.
the idea is that constant exposure creates fragmented attention.
Yeah.
And so fragmented attention, the result of that is it gives us reduced decision confidence, heightened comparisоnism, and that's we can compare a model versus a model, or we can compare ourselves versus a person, and this produces a subtle bondage, which is it's an inability to be settled. This is cognitive overload. In other words, when we have fragmented attention, when we begin to, it's we're never really settled. Then that creates a exhaustion, and then finally, an identity instability. And I think this one here kind of then finally leads into a little bit deeper. I think this is deeper even psychologically than the other two,
Yeah.
which is modern culture has shifted identity from received to constructed. Now, this is a theological point. I think it's important for our podcast today because we're not just simply social commentators,
Yeah.
right? We're theologians, and that means if culture shifts identity from being received to constructed, and what that means is that you receive your identity, or you receive who you are. Right? God gave Adam and Eve their image. But now, if your image is constructed, if your image is constructed on social media, if who I want to be, who I want to be perceived as, if right. So if you're responsible for who you are, what you believe, what you value, what you choose, you got to create your own value system. You got to create your own. Well, what do I believe about this, that, and the other? Actually, it sounds very empowering, but in practice, it becomes an unbearable weight of self authorship. I wish we had time, Chris, to really dive into that idea,
Hmm.
the idea of self authorship. But there are actually secular psychologists today that are beginning to say that the lack of absolute truths have produced an unbearable weight of self authorship because people have to author their identity. They have to author what they believe about everything. They have to, and so they feel like a giant marshmallow, if you can
Sure.
use that, a
Sure.
giant moral marshmallow.
Right.
And so this is the third factor that's contributing to exhaustion.
Man, there's a lot in that to really kind of unpack. I mean, I want to get back to that piece, the self-construction piece, because I do think that's the place, like you said, theologically, really to begin. I do want to just mention real quick, one of your notes said that platforms are engineered for dopamine-driven engagement loops, and I don't think that can be, I don't think that can be overstated of how
Yes.
impactful that piece is. A
Hmm.
generation that is truly, I don't think they understand the impact and the effect of things like doom scrolling,
Mm.
just the constant input of reels, and just think about this, the compound effect of reels. Number one, it's short little snippets,
Hmm.
which all secular psychologists have talked about how that ultimately over time affects our attention, our ability to focus and have attention on things. Our minds are so geared towards short little snippets that it's really, really hard
Yeah.
to focus on long-term things, whatever. So there's impact there. And then the emotional piece of it.
Right.
And, even the negative components it truly does become an addiction. There's a dopamine
Hmm.
hit. There's an addiction with that. So I don't think that can be overstated. That's a huge deal. I do the self-construction piece, this
Hmm.
unbearable weight of self-authorship.
Hmm.
I do think that there is, and I'm not an expert, but some of the reading I've done recently, I do. So you have, the move from modernism to postmodernism.
Hmm.
Modernism was built around scientific understanding.
Hmm.
And then postmodernism said, well, that's not solving any of the problems you said it was going to solve. You said science was going to resolve hunger
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
war
Hmm.
and all of these things, and it's not doing that. So
Hmm.
there's got to be something higher, which produce what you're talking about, which is you're in control of your own destiny. Truth
Hmm.
is malleable. You can make it what you want it to be. Your truth, like all of those kinds of things. And then, but I do think there's a generation that's now coming to the awakening and awareness of what you're talking about, that there is this it sounds liberating, it
Hmm.
sounds freedom giving,
Hmm.
but in reality it places squarely on your shoulders.
Hmm.
The responsibility
Everything.
for everything falls on your shoulders, which we were not designed to bear all of that. And so that becomes a massive contributor to mental health issues,
Hmm.
and the overwhelming feeling, Ken, of hopelessness. Because at the end of the day, here's what we know we're inadequate. We
Hmm.
know there's so many things beyond our control. We can act like it's not, whatever, but at the end of the day, we know one little accident, one little doctor's report, one thing that happens that's beyond our control. Those things are just constant reminders that we're not in control as much as we think we are in control. And so then now we have to confront that and feel that, and it's breeding this absolute just this absolute disdain for or this absolute hopelessness rather, that there's just nothing to live for.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a couple things I put by the way, I can't post into the chat, so I'm not sure what's going on there. So I sent you the book, or the title, Irresistible by Adam Alter, which he talks about. It's pretty interesting. He talks about how that these companies that create these games, online games, Candy Crush and all the different games, who create, there's this, it's the same principle, whether you're talking about gaming, whether you're talking about social media, and what it is it's feedback. And he basically talks about, he said, anybody who's ever had social media knows this. You post something that you think is really good. Like you post something, you're like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And what he said is that everybody's experienced going back and checking every 30 minutes to see if anybody's liked it or commented. And he said, and when you make a comment on something or whatever, or you get some kind of feedback, he said that kind of feedback is actually addicting.
Sure.
And he said, and it's not just it's not just coincidental. It is structurally, it's been structurally created to produce that outcome. So when we talk about dopamine hits and whatever, so in his book, Adam Alter, who's not a Christian that I know of, I think he's just a secular psychiatrist or psychologist that from Australia, who basically has stated and said that we're living in a day and age where, in his book Irresistible, we're living in a day and age where there is an addiction that's engineered into it. They've hired these psychologists and sociologists, and they've actually hired these people to guide them into creating. They don't say, can you help us addict people? They say, can you help this become, financially, just ridiculously successful? So I think
I don't know if it's him, if it's that book, or if it's a different book. But there was a place where they talked about they use the same mechanism for gambling.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. Yeah. I also want to comment on what you said about truth and the load of that, the bearing the weight of that. And I think it's important for us to recognize that as believers, as Bible believers, believing that we were made in the image of God, and the way that God made us was He made us perfectly suited to receive. And I think from a biblical perspective, I think we need to look, even in the New Testament, as Jesus comes into this earth, he begins to talk about the kingdom. He is redeeming. Jesus comes to redeem. He comes to restore. And Jesus begins talking about take no thought for what you'll wear, take no thought for where you'll live. Jesus begins to talk about these things. And I think it's so important because he's basically trying to reorient and place people into an understanding that God is our benevolent, loving Heavenly Father who wants to care for us. So we were made to receive, not create. So when humans get into a mode where they have to create their own truth and they have to create their own identity and they have to create their whatever, it's exhausting.
Yeah, that's so
And
good.
what's interesting is what you said was, and I think this is huge, is when you're only one click away from truth. You talked about postmodernism, right?
Yeah.
Postmodernism, part of postmodernism was, as you said, that I saw the bumper sticker on a car yesterday. It said the good thing about science is it's still true whether you believe, all caps, or not. It was interesting, right? It was a backhanded swipe at people of faith, right? The good thing about science is it's still true whether you believe, all caps, or not. Well, I yelled back at the car and the person in the car, but my windows were rolled up so that they certainly couldn't hear me. But I said, well, the good thing about truth is it's true whether you believe it or not. It doesn't become true because I've believed it. And I think this hits straight to what we're talking about. Because one click away from truth is still the anti-truth, which means there's still an anchoring principle.
Yeah.
We don't believe that anymore. But one click away from that is we don't believe anything anymore. And therein is the exhaustion.
Sure. Well, what's crazy about that whole thing is, okay, yeah, the science piece. Well, what science? The science that said the earth was flat, the
Right.
science that said that bloodletting was, a good medicinal procedure.
Yeah.
Like there's all kinds of science that continues to advance and grow, and understanding develops and moves beyond that, versus the forever settled word of God.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
so science actually perpetuates this instability,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because
Whereas
science doesn't have answers. They just seek. I mean, the true science just seeks. Science is not made or created. I mean, it has become a religion, but I mean, ultimately, it only tries to reveal identifiable, repeatable
you can only
patterns.
you right, and you can only use it on what you're able to observe,
Right.
and then make uh make theories and concepts on
Mhm.
the information that and
Mhm.
what you're able to observe.
Mhm.
And the peace that comes with serving God and faith is that you have a belief that he's the creator, he's the one that built, and it's forever settled, so it never changes regardless of the things around us that adapt and change.
Mhm. I'm going to make an assertion. Okay, I'm going to make an assertion,
Yeah.
and that assertion is too much autonomy introduces anxiety.
Okay.
Okay. And
Yeah.
here's the principle, right? The temptation of 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 Eve in the Garden of Eden was not just a temptation to sin. I think this is huge. As as good Bible believers, we need to realize what the serpent slash Satan was offering Eve was not to sin, but it was self-determination,
Sure.
self-construction. You will be like God. If you do this, you will be like God. Okay. So what enters, right? What entered into that? This is theology. But it's theology. I wish people really understood that theology isn't some highbrowed, idea. I wish people understood that theology was so relevantly connected to the things that we talk about every single day. So, for example, if self-determination, you will be like God, what entered into the world after they chose self-determination? They had awareness without wisdom.
Sure.
I was naked, I hid myself. God said, have you eaten of the tree? Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Adam and Eve did not know what to do with their awareness. So sin introduces awareness without wisdom. Children are born in 2026 with an awareness, a self awareness that they have no wisdom to know what to do with it, which is the importance
Hmm.
of parents. And which is so, secondly, is you have choice without clarity. So, what do people do with that choice? They begin to habitually try to choose the choices that feel best for them,
Yeah.
not the thing that is the best. It's what feels the best.
Sure.
And then finally people have experience, and we find this in the Garden of Eden. They had freedom without order. Chaos entered. So you could say they had freedom, but their freedom didn't have order. And so if your freedom produces chaos, have you really produced freedom?
Right.
Right? So the result was hiding and shame and fragmentation. So autonomy did not create freedom. This is the assertion. It created a burden of becoming your own God.
Goodness gracious. And what's crazy is, how appealing that it sounds.
Right.
That's the world we live in right now. How appealing it sounds to be able to say, I can make my own decisions.
Yeah.
I can be who I want to be.
Yeah.
I get to determine and decide all of these things.
Do your own
And
thing.
And but the reality is you can say that stuff all day long, but it's not the truth.
Right.
There certainly you have the ability to make choices and do things, but that doesn't mean that it's going to produce the outcomes that ultimately what you're really desiring. It's actually producing the opposite. I think at the core of this, there is an unrecognized desire,
Right. Right.
right?
Right.
And so you think that these things are going to be the things that produce it, when in reality it's producing the exact opposite thing.
Yeah. Right. Right. Like, you're saying, if I'm tracking with you, you're saying that there's a like an undefined emptiness.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Who you said
Yeah.
unrecognized desire? In other words, there's an emptiness that's undefined. It's recognizable. It's sensed. It's a sensed
Yeah.
emptiness or longing.
Right. If I can say, this is how I feel, and by doing this, this is going to make
Mm,
me feel better by doing
mhm,
this.
mhm,
That sounds great.
mhm,
Sounds amazing in the moment. It sounds
mhm.
so liberating and
Right.
freedom giving.
Yeah.
But the reality is, what do we know? It's only going to last for a moment, and then you have to deal with the consequences of those decisions. And
Wow.
this is, of course, I was doing a study on Hebrews yesterday, and the whole book of Hebrews is really about Jesus is better,
It's true.
right?
But it's the book of better, 100%.
He's better than the angels. He's better than Moses. He's better than Melchizedek. He's better than the
Hmm.
line of Aaron. He's the better covenant. Like
Yeah.
it's Jesus
Better,
is the
better than the
better,
sacrifice, Levitical sacrifices.
right?
If if
And
if if the priest had offered a sacrifice that could take away sins, there wouldn't have been any other sacrifice except the first one that was made in the wilderness.
right. So
Yeah.
all of these other things they sound enlightened. They
Hmm.
sound freedom giving. They sound like
Hmm.
it's going to bring fulfillment. But just like all things, they're hollow. They're empty.
Hmm.
And the only avenue to receive those things is, and this is why we talk all the time about Jesus is the better way.
Right.
He is the better, and his way is the better way, because again, science changes and alters. Feelings and emotions are fickle.
Right.
They don't how many times are we seeing right now where you have uh, sex change surgeries, and then somebody has a heart, like they get down the road and like, this didn't produce what I thought it was going to produce. And
Mhm.
so now I want to reverse it. I want to go back to what I was, because it didn't produce what I thought it was going to produce. We see this over and over again, Ken. We see this in relationships. People step out on their spouse because they think they need this extra excitement, and it doesn't produce that. Now they're left with the consequences and the calamity of their decisions.
Bro, so good. Yeah, and so so you know, what is Jesus's invitation? His invitation is to come to him, right? Jesus says, if you come to me, he said, my yoke is easy. So a yoke, it's interesting, it removes independent direction. A yoke
Yeah.
aligns you, um, aligns you to these, the yoke aligns you to a stronger, wiser guide. Um, Paradoxically, Jesus doesn't reduce responsibility. He just reorders authority. And so I think, as we move into this, so I think, okay, so our bottom line, I think this is huge. Our bottom line today is how do we have, because we got about 5 minutes or so, and let's bring it in strong here.
Sure.
Um, I like I like to really cause people to be able to say, okay, so well, how do you talk to people in this culture? And I think this is the psychological slash spiritual barrier that we're dealing with. Okay.
Sure.
And that is, culture says keep your options open, but
Yeah.
Jesus says surrender your life. Culture says you're in control. Jesus said, I'm in control. Follow me. So I think this is why, and this is something we talk about a lot, but I think this is why spiritual conversations are so important. Okay. And it's so important for us to realize that if we lead with submit language first, then all the modern person hears is, you're asking me to give up my freedom. But what they're actually experiencing is bondage, which is disguised as freedom. So,
Yeah.
what we have to do in a good spiritual conversation, and let's walk through, Chris, and you
Sure.
can lead us. Why don't you just lead us through this, but walk us through the spiritual conversation how to lead with diagnosis that resonates experientially rather than saying, okay, here's your problem. You need to submit to Jesus. They need to actually be able to have a self diagnosed realization that what they think is freedom is actually their bondage.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the first part of this spiritual conversation is there needs to be a revealing of the hidden bondage because they're truly blinded. Like you said, if you just come at it and you say, "Hey, you need to release this. You need to give this up, give up this freedom." That sounds like the exact opposite. Well, why would I do that? But when you start to get them to self-recognize and
Mhm.
become self-aware of the fact that what they're doing is actually producing more bondage in them. And
Mhm.
instead of, get them to recognize the endless options produce endless pressure, that
Yeah.
constant input is internal noise, that self-destruction is instability, and that much of the things that they're wrestling with, and this is where, again, like, as you're having conversations, so many people are dealing with mental health issues or anxiety or
Right.
whatever. Well, let's dig to that. That's the fruit.
Yes.
So let's have a fruit to root conversation.
So
Where does
good.
that come from? And you're able to redirect and guide them back to realize the things that you think are producing freedom are actually producing bondage.
Bro. And see, that's the thing. What you're saying there is that you're having a conversation with a person, helping them understand that people today are not struggling because we have too little control,
Right.
right?
Right.
As we already talked about, right? The experts are telling people that they're struggling because of the weight of endless, open, and meaningless choices. That's what we started with today. Is I think brings people to sort of that discovery, right? I think what you're saying is that if people think that what you're just simply saying is no, your problem is you just need to eliminate all self-expression, self-control, self-awareness, and just become, sort of this autonomic robot that follows Jesus. And that's not what Jesus is offering at all. So how do we start? How would you start with discover questions, like discovery questions that help people name the reality?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's some really good questions. And this is the revealing. This is how the revealing of the hidden bondage happens, is by asking these discovery questions where they start to be able to identify that root and specifically name the reality. Have you ever made a decision and then kept researching it afterward? Have you ever felt like even in good choices, it doesn't bring the peace that you thought it was going to bring?
Hmm.
Do you ever feel like your mind, and I think this is powerful. Do you ever feel like your mind never fully settles? Bro, there's not a person on the planet right now that would not identify with that. So
Hmm.
once you get them to identify, yes, man, my mind, and I was reading something this week or last week about the voice. Like we do what our internal voice typically is telling us to do. And there's this voice. Where is that voice coming from?
Hmm.
It's coming from whatever you're inputting into it. And so your mind is never settled because you got all these influences and all these things telling you certain things. And so they have to feel their own reality, and
Hmm.
they have to
That's it.
discover that before they can feel the challenge of needing change.
That's so good. And so and what that does is it allows them self-discovery, allows them to realize that I'm seeing it for myself about myself. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that truth isn't ultimately the anchor point. It doesn't mean that truth isn't ultimately the lens. What we're doing at this point, here's a good $10 word. What we're doing is we're helping a person exegete their own soul condition. It's a
Sure.
conversation with, not at. And so and then what this leads to is it leads to an ability to sort of reframe what freedom is. So so what we've done now is we've led a person down a pathway that allows them to see, I really don't have freedom. these things keep me locked into never-ending loops. I'm in bondage to the fact that I have good I think I made a good choice, and then it just continues. Well, maybe I didn't make a good choice, and maybe I didn't. And so your mind never settles, and then the person begins to realize that isn't really peace. I mean, all the decisions and choices and whatever that I've got. So now they're open to this idea of what would surrender look like. So how then, Chris, would we help a person reframe freedom once they've come to this self-discovery?
Right, which is critical, because whoever defines the terms and sets the premise,
Right.
that's going to direct the whole conversation. And so truly understanding, so what is freedom? What is freedom? That has to be the conversation. What does
Right.
freedom really look like? You know, a fish is free in water, but not in land, or
Yeah.
not on land.
You take it out of the aquarium, you're like, poor fish.
Right. So the point is, if you're made for something specific, if you're not living in that,
Yeah.
whatever that might be, if you're not living in that, then you're going to feel like that fish out of water. It may look like that the fish is constrained into
Yes.
an environment, and that's
But that's the
constrained because
environment it was made for.
but that's the environment it's made for.
Yeah.
And you extract it out of that with the idea and the mindset that I'm giving it freedom, and you're actually sentencing it to a
Mhm.
death, because it
What if,
wasn't
what if
intended
you
for that.
what if you said to somebody, what if you said, if let me ask you a question. If you took a train and said, poor train, it can only go where the tracks tell it to go. Look at all the power. Look at all the engineering. Look at all the stuff. If you remove the tracks, imagine what it would be for that train if you could just let that train be free from all the tracks. Well,
Yeah.
anybody would look at it and go, well, that's not really freedom, because the train couldn't be
Yeah.
and do what the train was made to do. Ah, uh-huh.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So then the next piece of this is, so you're getting them to be aware, right?
Mhm.
So to be able to identify the root, the hidden bondage that's there, self discovery, reframing them, helping them to understand and see what freedom really looks like, rather than the definition that comes from secularism or postmodernism or whatever, identifying it from reality,
Mhm.
which is what you just talked about. And then the second piece is or the next piece is presenting our story,
Mhm.
which Jesus is the relief, not the restriction.
Mhm.
And this is where the power of your story, where you're able to identify and relate to all of the things that that person may be dealing with or confronted with right now, and you're able to share with them your personal story about how looking to Jesus as the relief, surrendering and submission to the lordship of Jesus is the relief,
Mhm.
because now there's
Yeah.
clarity.
Yeah.
Now there's peace.
The relief from the problem.
Yeah.
Jesus is the answer. He is the relief. He's not, he's not some encumbering, burdensome Lord. He's the answer.
He's the answer.
Yeah.
We surrender in lordship to him because because he's the Prince of Peace. His kingdom is about peace.
Mhm.
He wants to share his peace with you, and take that pressure that you're feeling, extract that pressure off of you, and let him bear that. Bro, that's
Mhm.
the whole, again, he's the sacrifice. He
Mhm.
took all of that on so that we don't have to have confusion, pressure, indecision. Instead, we get
Mhm.
clarity, peace, and direction.
Yeah. And I think people that are good at telling their story, the interesting thing, here's what I love about telling people, you need to be able to drive the point home, that Jesus is the alternative through your own story, which means that you have to be a living witness, which means you have to be living it out yourself.
Yeah.
It's possible to have a conversation with someone in a context, like, for example, you could have a conversation with a person and not be living it, but you could be proclaiming all of the truths. But you can't say to a person, look, following Jesus hasn't shrunk my life. It anchors my soul in security and it gives me peace. But a
Yeah.
person has to be able, those have to be recognizable uh, qualities characteristics of your walk with God. They have
Yeah.
to be able to see the fruit of the Spirit. We have to, I think this is important. If we've got fear, if we've got, if we've got anxiousness or whatever, you name your thing there. Um, it is an indicator that we're human,
Yeah.
but it's also an indicator that we're not availing ourselves to what Jesus has called us to live in. And so Jesus actually calls the people of God, and I think this is a challenge for us, that we don't present the truth in an abstract vacuum. We present the truth in its living clarity in
Yeah.
our lives. Jesus
Yeah.
hasn't shrunk my life. He gives me security. He gives me peace. Here's an example of that, or whatever. And so I think that's huge. And so ultimately, Chris, I think if we could walk people through our story, that Jesus is not the restriction, he's my relief from the struggle.
Yeah.
It gives us the ability then, as we've shared our story, to invite them into
Yeah.
that pisteuo, invite them into that faith.
Absolutely. And so then the last part of that is that call for faith defined precisely.
Right.
Not just believing in the right things, not just having
Yes.
abstract beliefs, but truly trusting that God has a plan that produces a better way or a better life than just
Mhm.
endless self-destruction.
Isn't it amazing, Chris, that in that sense, right, that because we're having a conversation with a person in real life about the fact that they're not finding maybe the peace they're looking for, or that
Yeah.
their mind never fully really settles.
Yeah.
And we say, look, when I pray, when I go to the word of the Lord, when I begin to think about and consider that God has given me these promises, and that underneath are the everlasting arms,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
when I listen to the old song, only Jesus can satisfy your soul. When I sit and I contemplate these things and I give it to the Lord, like really give it to the Lord, like, God, look, I
Sure.
can't control this, and so
Sure.
there's no reason for me. I'll do what I can do, but right now the best thing I can do is give it to you, and all of a sudden peace ensues.
Yeah.
Then I think the beautiful thing about this is that it's not just simply that we're trying to make somebody an ideological convert. You need to believe the right things about the right things. No, it's literally an invitation for a person to
So
let
good.
Jesus produce a way better life
Yeah.
than what we have found through our endless self-direction.
Man, that's so good. That's so good. This is such an important conversation. It's an important conversation for us to be aware of. But as you said, how are we communicating with the people around us who are just like this? This is the gospel that's being preached in our world.
Yes.
Self-expression.
Yes.
Be whoever you want to be. Don't be defined by anything. Don't let anybody impose their thoughts or feelings on you, and instead of producing the freedom, instead of producing wholeness and health, it's producing just unbelievable collateral damage. So, man, great conversation today, Ken. Like this one's got some, it's got some depth to it. So
Right.
probably something we'll come back and dig into. So appreciate the comments, and have a lot of opportunity to kind of segue off because of some time constraints. So certainly appreciate all the engagement and interaction today, and hopefully today's conversation helps you. And man, go be the representative of what it looks like to live the better way of Jesus, and find somebody who needs to experience the true freedom that
Mhm.
can only come from Him. So appreciate you joining us today. We may have a little bit of a schedule issue, Ken, next week, and so I'll talk to you about that here
Okay.
shortly. So there's a chance we may have to adjust the schedule just a little bit, but we will be back at some point, and so we'll keep you posted on that. Until then, go live mobilized.